I think your mission in life to help the next generation to shape them in a loving, supportive way is so beautiful. I want to start this conversation with your experience when you were in first grade and you were falling behind in math. What was happening?
Yes, I think all children have an innate natural need to be seen, to get that attention, and it's much easier to get it from your parents, but it's where it means the most. There's studies to prove that and everything, but to go back to the experience specifically, what happened was I was falling behind in school. I was not passing math at grade one. And my mom, I remember her being like the high performing, super smart woman that she was. She couldn't believe it because she was used to having, good feedback from her children. So I remember there was a moment in that, like, I would say maybe just like middle of the pack type of student. And then I started falling behind. And then after that moment, she spent maybe 3 months like sitting with me after school for a few hours working on my math skills. And she said, waited until I was starting to gain confidence. And then she said from that point on, I was at the top of the class for the rest of my school career. So for me, I remember that I was maybe six,
Yeah, that's what I was
7
thinking. You
years
were
old.
6 years old.
Yeah, but I remember it because it's one of those determining events in my life that you have emotional memories around it, so you really remember them well. And I do, like, I think the following year, like after that was towards the end of grade one. Grade two, I got a scholarship and a recognition from the ambassador of England, who was like visiting Colombia at that time. And it was just one thing that led to my confidence being boosted in another. And then from that point on, I always believed in myself to be able to accomplish the academic challenges that the school set up. So for me, it was an aha moment in knowing what are the things that create confidence and success in children on that academic level.
Is that what motivates you to become an educator, to become a teacher?
For sure, I think that's definitely one of the experiences that shaped me. Seeing my mom, she was a teacher, and her teaching me and the impact that that had in me always made me, oh, this is an easy way that I can help people. Like, it's just something that I always loved. It came very natural to me, and because I was good in school, I always was able to tutor. Like when I was in high school, I would do like reviews of what we were doing, like biology, English, everything, to study myself, like the summary of everything in a few pages with diagrams and stuff. And I would use them to study. And then all my friends wanted, like my classmates wanted it too. So I started a business and I started selling those study packages.
Ah.
And I just realized how this is a skill that I could use to help others early on. And so it just naturally led me into a career as a teacher.
But what's interesting is I feel like I've heard you say, Houlie, that you're not so much about like instilling this head knowledge as you are in making connections and supporting kids. Can you explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. So that's the thing I found was the most impactful as a teacher. Um, I'm going to split it into two. So there's always the consistent factor for the bright child in the classroom was not always the smartest, but it always had to do with a present parent. Like the kids that were standing out were always the kids that had the parents that were present, asking about, them, wondering what they can do better. You could just know that the parents were involved in the upbringing and the education of the children.
So it's not that the kid had a particularly high IQ, let's say, that made them outstanding or geniuses. The deciding factor or the greatest influence on them was a present parent.
Exactly. And I think a lot of that has to do with confidence. Like when your parents believe in you, you believe in yourself, then you push yourself further, then you become smarter
Yeah.
by as an effect of taking more risks and believing in yourself and feeling like you have a stable support system. But then as a teacher, I always found like I always connected with my kids. That's the way I felt like if they feel like they're understood, then and they'll trust me, and then they'll listen to what I have to say. And so I always made it a point to create that connection. I taught high school at one point, and high school students sometimes can have more reservations against their teachers. You know?
Oh yeah.
And I remember being like, there's this specific memory I come back to, like this specific student who, she didn't like me, and I just, for some reason, some other student told me that she didn't like me because I'm friends with the students. And I remember I sat with her one time. She was bringing me her assignment, and instead of just like you know, giving her a grade, I was like, can I just have a moment with you? And I sat down with her, and I went through it, and I told her the things like where I saw her in her work. And that was the moment that student changed. Like, you know, our connection changed, but also her performance changed in my class. I was telling you the story of how when I was a supply teacher, the school kept trying to hire me full time, but I kept saying no because I had other businesses on the side, and I didn't like the idea of teaching full time because I thought was very exhausting and didn't allow me to really put my best self forward. So I had the opportunity to teach all the way from kindergarten to grade 12. And I would, let's say, teach grade 4 and then come back 2 months after to teach grade 6 for 3 months or whatever. And the kids would find me in the hallway and run to me and ask me, Miss, can you please come back to our classroom? And you know, for me, that was a very validating experience because I knew that the connection with those kids was the thing that mattered most. Everything comes after if that connection exists, and you're setting yourself up to be a successful educator if you put that first, I believe.
So let's talk a little bit about the well-being of children. Whether we send our kids to homeschool or private school, or whether we send them to public school, wherever they go, we are the most consistent influence on them as parents. Is that right? Can that contribute to their well-being?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the most contributing factors. If you want, I can share about this study that they did during the World War II.
Absolutely.
On how children that lost their parents, they studied the children that lost their parents, and they compared these groups of children with children that didn't lose their parents. And then they split the group into, one group was sent to foster homes, like when obviously they're not going to be treated the best, and the other group was sent to a group of like foster parents that were loving and caring. And the conclusion from the study was that the brains of the children that have loving parents was growing at a much faster pace. So it's, you know, it's beyond just what they're learning, and the environment is the attention of the parent as a major factor for that absorption of knowledge, of confidence, of skills to happen.
What if it's negative attention, Houlie? What if it's a parent who's like, instead of your mom lovingly bringing you up to speed in first grade in math, what if she had been like hounding you and calling you names? Like, how would that have affected your psyche?
I think that's how trauma is created. And that's why as a parent, we have such an important task to check ourselves, you know, like I don't think I ever was as challenged or as motivated to be the best person that I could be until I became a mom, because I realized that my slips will cause long-term trauma in my child, you know, human that I love most in the world. And so that stake for me was everything to be a motivation to be better. Like, not that I wasn't motivated before, but when you have a child like 0 to 6 years old, that's such a critical stage in the development of the brain, and just is so vulnerable, and little things can create such great effects in both ways, right? Like, you have the potential to raise a child to greatness, and then you also have the potential to ruin that. So
do you have any stories, without naming any names, of things going one way or the other, like a parent or maybe even yourself, like when you kind of blew it? And we know everything's redeemable, so it's not to condemn, but just to relate. Or even a story of a parent who did something beautifully right and they saw their child blossom.
Yeah, I think that, for example, the part where we say the redeemable, I think it's important to talk about that aspect because no one
Yeah,
is perfect, right?
I know. I've
Um,
noticed.
yeah, and I think when I started reading, I don't know who I quote on this, but I read about the definition of trauma being a shocking event that you don't that you like that you don't process or that you don't talk about.
It
So
remains kind of stuck.
exactly. So it's not about like avoiding all kinds of shocking events. That's like a natural part of life. Like, look at our world that we live in today.
Yeah.
It's inevitable. It's about the awareness and opening the conversations around it. So if you ever are a parent and you lose it at your child, sit down with your child, acknowledge that you did that, apologize for it, and then try to be better. And that's all that we can really do. And if you let that child explain or express their feelings on how they felt in that moment, that alone will heal like the trauma that is occurring.
Process it with them. Show yourself as a human, right? Show up as a person who's vulnerable and real instead of brushing it under the rug, because eventually there's a lot of dust that's going to pile up under the rug and later may cause the child to stumble.
And also, the child is looking to you for a role model. So if you're a person that never admits their mistakes, they're going to think making mistakes is absolutely wrong, and they're going to do the exact same thing growing up. Like, if there can be a person that looks at themselves and reflects on how they can be better the next time, that's the path to greatness and success. If they are the person that's going to avoid it because there's deep shame, just because you don't talk about it, the child is smart enough to capture that wasn't talked about and then replicate that behavior as well.
Right. And can you get specific? Because I do love stories, like either from your own life or from a parent that you saw where something just went downhill or where something went in the right direction.
Well, like for the off the top of my head, for the right direction, like I can share that
Yeah.
experience, like what that I mentioned earlier about when I was in kindergarten and
Yeah.
in my own personal experience. And then I'll do you mind if I just keep it like in personal? Like my mom.
Oh, yeah, that's
My
fine.
mom told me a story on how her upbringing was like her mom was very strict on like what you can say and what you cannot say, and was always very limiting in the way that she was supposed to behave, and and I think she was telling me a story about how she was a part of a beauty pageant, and my grandma was like telling her what she needed to wear specifically, and she felt like that was so unfair because she felt like she was expressing herself like and it wasn't anything inappropriate or anything, but it was just like the color of a scarf or something silly, or she wanted like extra ruffles on her sleeves or something like that. And I will say that my mom has done, and we talk about this all the time because again, you have to create that conversation, reflection dynamic. How she had to do so much work in her life to become the kind of person that felt fine expressing themselves and giving their opinions on things and not always trying to be a people pleaser, pushover, because she, was raised that way.
Yeah.
And it's a different time. So I'm sure that specific model applies to a lot of people, in that you have parents that tell you it has to be like this or nothing.
Yeah.
And then you just feel like your opinion doesn't matter.
You learn to kind of keep it all inside. And then, unfortunately, things that are unexpressed may express themselves in symptoms of sickness or what have you. We never know. A lot of people in the health and wellness space now suggest that trauma could be at the root of all or a lot of dis-ease.
Yeah. Like they talk about somatic. You ever heard
Yes.
about, yeah. And how swallowing and repressing emotional or psychological issues creates in specific places too in the body. Like have you ever read those books about somatic diagrams where they show you like the spleen is related to
It's like meridians, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yes, I
That's
have.
weird.
I have heard of this, and I've also heard that there are simple exercises. So a lot of times people get stressed, right? Who can relate, right? I'm raising my hand. I can totally relate with my own stress levels at times. And there are simple somatic exercises we can do to kind of get our back in the parasympathetic nervous system, including yawning, including simply breathing out. Like, horses kind of go, and you might even find that you do that naturally if you're like having a hard day or you come across an email that bothers you. You're like, well, actually, that little lip trill situation relaxes the body. Kids sometimes even do it automatically, instinctively, because it's a help to them. And so this leads me, Houlie, to the next question I wanted to ask you. You are a single mom, you're running Homeschool to Go, like there's a lot on your plate. What are some things that you do to stay healthy? Because you said earlier, once you had your kid, you were like, okay, now I need to step it up and show up as my healthiest and strongest self. Yeah. Tell us about some of your health practices.
Absolutely. I really believe in that 80-20 rule of you do your best work. Like the things that you're best at, you just need 20% of the time, and to have 80% productivity, and vice versa. The things that you're, so I believe in cutting down the hours that I'm working for the sake of those hours being of more quality. So I do have things that I do. I lift weights. And so I work from home, and I have the studio and everything at home. So I spend a lot of time there, work with homeschooling my child. So I go out to go to the gym, and it kind of changed the vibration, like the mindset a little bit. And so I find lifting weights is more long lasting and boosting in your metabolism and like it health implications, but you save time because you can, a cardio session, you would have to be 2 hours. A gym session, you can shorten it, right? So I love lifting weights. I care about the quality of my water. So I go to a spring. Is the water that I got from you when you're visiting. I go to a spring and I get the water, and then I constantly test it. So I have like the heavy metals test and the other so I'm to make sure that the water is clean, and it is. And then I also just try to eat as healthy as I can. I'm very intuitive with my eating, but I try to make, things from scratch. So because I have so much on the go, I usually do meal prepping. Like I make, one big curry with all the veggies, or like a salmon with, and then I kind of have enough for more days after that, because I care about that, being a healthy meal that I eat. And like it's like I'm somewhere in between practicality and health. For example, like Greek yogurt with blueberries and hemp seeds, that's a go-to snack that I always have. Or I make like a frozen mango with a hemp seeds and Greek yogurt as well, and I make it into popsicles. And then every time Gio wants a snack, it's like, go grab it. And then it's just like I just can give him as much as he wants, because it's there. So those are my priorities. Like I'm not so much about, I wouldn't call myself a chef by any means, but I make sure it's healthy, and I make sure it's easy to make.
So these things sound great for your body. And we know actually that when you're physically strong, it helps your emotions and your mental health as well. But what do you do also for that mindset, that healthy mindset that keeps you going on the days when things are challenging?
Oh, for sure. Breathing obviously is always a big part of everything, but I think it's also a discipline in my practice of focusing on the good things, because my journey hasn't always been the easiest, and I've had the experience of flipping my life upside down for the better, or downside up, I should say, for the better. And I feel like the result of like those positive results came from those moments where I was feeling lost, and I decided I was not going to be a victim. I was going to be a creator or co-creator. And so I find it's important to have that. Yes, you have to live through the emotions, but you also have to, not indulge too much in that negative spiral of anxiety, really.
Yes.
And uncertainty is a part of life, but if you can focus on the things that bring you hope and excite you, and surround yourself with the people that have similar values, you would end up performing better in general, I find.
Of course. I don't know if you've heard of this study recently, but they compared the top 25 players in tennis, I believe it was. And the difference between the top 5 and the other 20, that again, were still at the top of their game, really, but not the ones who were winning as often. The top 5 kept a positive mindset. If they lost a point, they wouldn't rehearse that lost point in their mind. They would move on thinking, okay, I still got this, or whatever. I don't know what their little techniques were for flipping it, but they didn't stay hopeless. Whereas even the top 20 there, beneath them, beneath the top 5, would probably start rehearsing like, oh, shoot, I missed that one, and then remembering that. And then that would cause some issues, like you said, the downward spiral.
Yes. And bringing that back to education and
Yeah.
the programs that we design them with that in mind. It's like you are raising a child to the absolute best education that they can have. You are focusing on the things that they do well in and the things that excite them. And then instead of trying to, like you're falling behind in multiplication, let's do 3 hours of multiplication. That's like terrifying, or like, a child's going to be mortified if you frame it that way. It's like, you're bad at this, sit down and do it. Like, how?
But I feel like that's what happened to you, actually,
Well,
a little bit when you were in
like I would say
first grade.
I think for me, my mom sat with me, and having the attention of my mom, because I was like one of 3 children, and both my parents were working all the time, and I would say I love attention. So having that attention from my mom really just meant the world to me, and that's why I put so much effort into that. Like,
So it didn't come across as like cracking the whip to make you do it. It felt like love and attention.
Exactly. It was definitely love and attention. It was like, oh my goodness, my mom is going to put in the time to explain these things to me. Like, and for me, I don't remember having any feelings. Again, it's so long ago. It's a very blurry memory, but I don't have any feelings of being like, if you don't perform, you'll fail. Like, there was none of that. For me, it was just like extra time with my mom. Wonderful. And then boom, I just became so much more confident, and I didn't even see myself being not confident to confident, because I don't remember, but it's my mom who told me she's seen it in me.
Wow.
So yeah, I think it's very important when you're educating your children, when you're participating in their lives, to feed like fuel the passions and fuel, when we design curriculums and projects for the children, we do it with that in mind. Bringing up their brilliance rather than chopping them down or pointing out insecurities.
I love that, bringing up their brilliance. What a beautiful picture that brings to my mind. And I wonder, when you were teaching in the school systems as an educator at Cambridge schools that also brought you up and where you had some learning, were you able to do that for kids, or was that when you realized this isn't working?
Right. So I was able to do it to an extent, but not to the fullest potential. And being the person that I was, the way that I was raised, where it's like, it's so important to for me, my greatest fear is not expressing my full potential and sharing that with the people around me. So when I thought of I'm in this class with 19 students, which is a small classroom, right?
Yeah.
And they're 1000% not getting the best that I could give them. And they're also not giving the best that they could give, because they need more attention to be able to do that. And in this setup is going to be impossible. I have to, there's always just going to be a small group of students that get that benefit, because they're the ones that go and reach out for it. And then there's the other key kids that you would have to reach for, but you don't have time for that as a teacher. So that's where I was like, there has to be a way where every child in the world can get this full attention, and it's, I believe, through their parents. And then the next barrier after that is like, how do you do homeschooling in a world that's so demanding? Like, on top of a demanding career, now you have to prioritize the education of your child. And so that's why I built something to support parents and be the right hand, so that it could be more of a smooth process in the homeschooling.
And what's so cool to me is that you, as a single mom with a busy career, can still do it. Like, you found a way not only to get the tools that you need to teach your son, but you're helping other families do the same. And if a single
Absolutely.
mom like you can do it, so busy, anybody can do it.
Absolutely. And I teach actually when parents first come in and I see that they're having trouble with their schedules because the moms work, I teach them how to build their family rhythm, is what I call it. And it has a lot to do with trying not to multitask and with compartmentalizing your days. Like there are the days that you're going to focus on your career tasks, and then maybe those days your kids are doing other things.
Yeah.
And then there's the days that you're going to focus on your kids. And then those days your career can wait an extra day for you to, to an extent, tend to the things that your business or your boss or whatever.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're saying this though. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm excited. Like, we think multitasking makes us more productive, but actually it sounds like you're in favor of single tasking.
Absolutely in favor of single tasking, and I've seen it be so fruitful in my life and in all the parents that are in my program, because that's the first thing that we train them on when they come in, and you watch them flourish, and they would never go back on their schedules. It's nice to be sitting down with your child doing something together, the project, whatever, and not feel like you have all these things pulling at you, because okay, these tasks, I have a time that I'm going to see them tomorrow. And then at that time, I'm going to be doing that. So then you're giving your best to each situation. And again, it's maximizing the productivity of the actual task,
Yes, and I would say not only maximizing the productivity, but maximizing the connection.
Yes.
Which is so beautiful, and every kid is so eager for it.
And the well-being, the satisfaction that you're getting from doing it, it changes everything. And then I also, another really good tip when it comes to the productivity, I talk about expansion and contraction. So you can think of this in terms of both your child, like how you homeschool them, and your own scheduling of your workday. So expansion is all those activities that are like exercise, being outside, like you're expanding you're using your body, you're being physical. And then contraction is you're being more mental. So you're gonna do, let's say, start the day with exercise or a walk, and then get all your most demanding emails done in the morning, and that's your mental. And then you go expand again, and then you contract again. And if you have a balanced routine throughout, where you're balancing both of this throughout your day, your productivity levels will be maximized for sure. And the same with the kids, like they'll never get bored, and they'll always be into the next activity that's coming up.
Oh my gosh, that's fascinating. I never thought about these things as expanding and contracting, the different facets of our schedule in life. That's really interesting. So I have two more questions as we start to wrap up. One is this. Everyone always says when you homeschool, your kid will lack social skills. Talk to us about that.
Oh, yes, it's a big myth, but it's actually a myth, and it's a misunderstanding. When you look at the studies, I'll start with this. When you look at the studies, you can look up the National Home Education Research Institute. This doctor, I've met at the HSLDA conference. He is amazing, and he put so much time and work going through all the peer review studies on homeschool kids, and the homeschool kids are significantly above institution kids, like kids that go to an institutional schools, in measures of academic success.
Yeah.
But even more in measures of emotional, psychological, and social skills.
Fascinating.
So they measure like peer interaction, they measure leadership, self-esteem. And then I read this book. It's called Hold On to Your Kids. I maybe sent, I don't want to butcher the names. Gabor Mate.
Oh, Gabor Mate.
Mate. And then I don't want to say that. Gordon Newfield, I think is the other doctor. So they talk about how in the early ages, so pre-K age to late elementary, like 5th, 6th grade, children have a emotional need, a basic need for belonging. And so if you're at home that's an easy thing to give, right? If you're in a school, they have to fit in with the kids to be able to get that belonging. So when kids are so little and they're still like shaping and solidifying their values, they're going to be up for putting those values aside in order to belong, for a matter of survival. You know, if I have friends, I'll be okay, because this is like the place that I'm in.
It's a new tribe.
Yeah.
The parent's not right there. They've got to find a way to survive, and it's by clinging to the group around them.
So what it turns out in higher anxiety, because deep down they know that they're putting away what they really think to be able to fit in. And that's not healthy social skills, because that's you know, putting yourself, we all know that doesn't end well when you put yourself aside to try and fit in. And just more social anxiety, because it tells their brain that in order to connect with others, they have to abandon themselves. That's not the case when it comes to homeschool kids in general. When you look at the statistics, homeschool kids are even more accepting of other kids as well, because they're like, we're always allowed to be ourselves. Like, anybody can be themselves. So there's a lot of tolerance. There's a lot of, you know, lack of judgment and lack of, you know, more individualistic thinking in the homeschool children, and more confidence as well. So that's a big part of being able to socialize.
Wow, so fascinating. I've often thought homeschool kids obviously excel academically, but I didn't realize there was this kind of proof, scientific backing from studies done that they have better social skills, self-confidence, and leadership.
Yeah, and you know, they do, if you as a homeschooler want to improve the social skills of your child, then know that they're going to be looking at you and your interactions for modeling those social skills. So the way that you communicate with the other adults in your home, that's where what they're going to be absorbing their social skills from. How you talk to the person when you go to the store, how you ask for a favor, how you reciprocate kindness, all those things is how kids actually learn social skills in the day-to-day.
Yes, and I think you know this, but I have traveled the world, and among the indigenous peoples I've met, the parent, as you were suggesting earlier, is the primary influence for the kids. And maybe in some ways, homeschooling is a wise tradition.
Yes, it's homeschooling began in the Industrial Revolution, when the parents, all of a sudden, they needed so many people to go work at the industries, and they started sending the kids to the factories. And some kids were losing limbs. They were having accidents because they couldn't follow instruction. So then what they did in order to overcome that is they sent the kids to a separate institution to teach them how to follow instruction.
Oh, that's when public school starts.
That's when public school started.
I see.
So in fact, public school was originally designed to teach kids to follow instructions, because they needed them to work at the factory jobs.
Yeah, who said that? We want factory workers, not thinkers or poets or creatives.
So schools, like in their you know, very original design, they're not meant to expand creativity. You know, and that's the setup. Like, when you have one teacher to so many kids, the only way to keep order is by creating those robotic rules.
Yes.
And you know, now they have different educational models and different types of school systems. Like Montessori, they have one teacher to every 6 children, and they have separate tables. And all the private schools that know better, they're starting to adjust to a you know, a less follow instruction methodology. But that was the original design. So it's important to not forget that homeschooling was the tradition.
Before all the public schools and everything got
Exactly.
established,
Yeah.
parents were the primary educators. And that's still the case regardless of the situation for your child's education. So now, Houlie, I want to ask you the question I love to pose at the end. If the listener could do one thing to improve their health, whether this is related to education or not, what would you recommend that they do?
I would, as I was saying yesterday, I would recommend to compartmentalize your life and make sure you include your priorities. So like for me, my priority is in my family and how I'm raising my children. So then I built my career and everything else around that. And I compartmentalize it. So, you know, there's time for work, there's time for family, and then there's also time for you know, being healthy and doing the things that I need to do to be able to show up as my absolute best mom that I can be, absolute best teacher support that I can be.